Hello, and welcome to Tuesday Talks. My name is Akhil Khan, the director of Project Open. Project Open is a $1 million federally funded HRSA grant aimed at the opioid epidemic, but we have since launched and kind of focusing at broader substance use disorders. And substance use disorders can take many different forms, from drugs to alcohol. We focus in three main areas: prevention, treatment, and recovery. September is Recovery Month, so it's only apt that we do a recovery themed Tuesday Talk today. Today with us, we have Jan Birks. Jan is a licensed chemical dependency counselor and a licensed clinical social worker specializing in mental health and substance use. She's worked in the field of addiction services and mental illness for over 13 years and is the owner and CEO of J. Birks Consulting. Jan is in long term recovery from opioid use disorder, and she recently joined two pretty key teams focusing on opioid addiction, which we'll get into a little bit later today. Her work has been focused in supporting individuals and family members in their pursuit to recover from addiction and mental health disorders, and finding ways to help individuals recover in general. She's also a certified master life coach and a substance use professional with the Department of Transportation. When Jan's not working with clients, you can find her volunteering in her community and in her church. She's also an author and speaker, and I had the privilege of being able to join one of Jan's talks at a conference, Cyrano Action Summit. It was a virtual conference, and when I heard Jan speak, it was very clear that we needed to have Jan come talk on our Tuesday Talk platform. So, Jan, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you have a very busy schedule, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you so much, Akil. It's really good to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. And so, Jan, you've got a lot of credentials. Talk to us a little bit about your LCSW or LCDC, kind of what made you go get those, and how that helps you today.
Yeah, so actually, I'm in recovery almost 14 years. And so when I went into recovery, I felt like I needed to reach back and help and do something. So I went back to school and I completed my associate's degree in clinical counseling and psychology. And then I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. And then I went ahead and got my master's degree in social work. So that's what brought me to this point.
Very, very nice. I work a lot with the local recovery community organization, and they say that it's pretty common that when people enter in recovery and once they get into stable recovery, it's they want to find ways to give back and help back. Kind of, would you mind talking to us about your journey, pre-recovery and now post-recovery, and kind of why is Jan an expert in this in our peer support area that we're about to talk about?
Sure. So once I got into the field, which I've been in almost 14 years, the same amount of time that I've been clean and sober, I just felt the need, to help somebody who was going through what I had already been through and to offer them hope and to show them that recovery is possible. So many of the agencies that I worked with had peer support specialists. And I learned a lot during that time working with groups and individuals and peers. And I kind of noticed that there was a difference, actually a big difference between professional treatment and peer support. And I would overhear conversations with peers and their clients, and then conversations with therapists and their clients. And as a therapist, sometimes I would actually cringe at the conversation because peers to me were just raw. They were more down to earth, more authentic, and more real. And they were able to talk to their clients in a different way than therapists are able to. So that's another thing that kind of got me interested, because I feel like that I'm a real person. I don't know how not to be Jan and how not to let my lived experience come out. So that was one of the advantages that I thought that peers had over therapists.
Jan, if we could kind of just talk about it a little bit more broadly. Maybe there's some folks out there that aren't familiar with it, but if you don't mind, just it's kind of might be inference from the name, but what is peer support, and are there any different names for peer support that people might see or read around there that would kind of mean the same thing?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, peer support is an evidence based practice meaning that scientific research has been done and peer support services have been proven to work for most people. And so, what peer support is, they're activities and interactions between people who have shared experiences. And since today we're looking at peer support through the lens of substance use disorder and mental illness, it would be a person who has had a similar experience in substance use disorder or mental illness. So, some of the different names that I'll be using for peer support are peer support specialists, peer support advocates, peer recovery coaches. So all those names are interchangeable. So I may use one today, I may use a different one another day, but they all mean the same. So there's just different names used, but for the same thing.
So it's kind of like a mentor. Would that be kind of the more common term for it then? So, like you mentioned, someone who's had that experience, who's been through it, who's walked the path, and can relate to someone, and ultimately help them with their recovery journey.
Yes, they could definitely be referred to as mentors for sure. And a lot of them are mentors in different agencies. So, but today we're going to kind of focus in on the peer support, but it's basically the same thing as a mentor. Yes.
Perfect. So, tell me, why should people care? Why is it important? Why should every area try to invest in peer support when it comes to recovery from substance use or mental illness, or as we like to call it, brain health conditions?
hmm Because actually, peer support helps the clients in a different way than any other service does. There are a lot of clients who may be resistant to services, but if they have a peer, someone who can walk alongside them, someone who's been through something that they've been through, then they're more relatable, Because I've had situations where when a person found out that I was in long-term recovery from substance use disorder and mental illness, it's sort of like they just relaxed and they just like took a deep breath and said, okay, wow. So I just noticed that there's a huge difference in someone who has the lived experience. They can have empathy for that person.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why it's really important.
So, for peer support, you mentioned peer support specialist. Kind of, what's the typical role? I mean, is it like pen pal, best friend, everyday talking? Is it monthly, weekly interaction? I mean, what kind of skills are needed to be a peer support advocate specialist or a peer support coach?
Yeah, excellent question. So I would say there are quite a few roles that the peer specialist plays, and they would be understanding. Okay, that's a role. Empathy would be a role. A non-judgmental attitude, that would be a role.
Hey Jan, I don't know if it cut out for you, but it just cut out for me. The last thing I heard was understanding. They need to be understanding. Could you please jump back for a second? Sorry about that.
That's okay, sure. So after understanding, I said empathy.
Empathy.
They have to have empathy for the person. A non-judgmental attitude, right? They have to have resources that they can share, right? They have to be able to assist the person in finding and following their own recovery path, because that's the bottom line. The bottom line is recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So the role is to help that person find their road to recovery.
You mentioned that they need to be able to share resources. Any example of what you mean by resources?
Sure. So a lot of times peer support have already gone through the process that their client is going through. So a lot of times they know more about what's available in the community than some of the agencies do. And they have firsthand experience. They can help direct the client to resources such as housing, medical aid, legal aid, groups, therapy, all sorts of resources. Many times, again, the peer support specialist knows about these things. And even if they haven't experienced them personally, they have learned these resources or gotten these resources from other clients. So it's like an educational process too.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So when I heard you talk, Jan, in the conference that you and I met in, you made a saying that really stuck with me. That oftentimes, and it's evidence based, and research has shown that peer support is oftentimes as effective, if not more effective, than professional treatment. Can you talk a little bit more about that statement, and but then still talk about when and where professional treatment is needed, and when and where peer support might not be appropriate, if at all.
Right, right. So with peer support and professional treatment, the message is the same, but it's just a different way to get there.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about maybe the differences and then the similarities.
Sure.
So let's think about peer support for a minute. So with peer support, that can be one-on-one or individual. It can also be group peer support. The same with professional therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It could be individual or group. An advantage of peer support is that many times the peers are able to get the person away from a clinical location. And also, they can spend more time with the person. They're not like on the clock. And, in therapy, of course, if you're 55 or 60 minutes is up, basically it's up,
Yeah.
And it makes a person kind of feel like they're rushed, right? Whereas peer support to me is more informal. It's more relaxed. Like I was saying earlier about the conversation with the client and the peer as related to how I think the conversation should have went with a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
We therapists, I'm telling you, we are really cognizant of ethical boundaries and what to say and what not to say. And peers, basically, after they build a rapport with the client, they can basically let it rip, because.
Yeah. Well, so you're kind of in a unique position because you have lived experience. You are a peer support, but then you are an LCSW and an LCDC. How has that helped you, and how has that kind of made it sometimes maybe challenging to switch from treatment hat to peer support hat, or do they kind of work really? I'm assuming they work well together. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, does every peer support? Let's start with, does every peer support specialist? Most of them, do they have an LCSW, or usually not?
Usually not.
Yeah.
So most of the ones that I've worked with don't have a master's degree. But see, that's the interesting part right there is that, so how can someone without a degree have a higher impact on somebody than a therapist, And it's all about that connection, Akil.
Yeah.
You talked about it on that call, the summit that day. That's the main thing, that connection. We need connection with people. So when somebody listens to your story and they feel that thing, it makes a world of difference. Not to say that therapists haven't had lived experiences either, because as you just said, I'm a therapist and I've had the lived experience. But yeah, sometimes I have to take one hat off and put another hat on.
Yeah.
And so that's also when the life coaching comes in handy too. Because with the life coaching, I could be more relaxed with that.
Do you ever find it difficult to switch hats? Like,
Oh, yeah.
you ever start to go into treatment mode when you need to be in pure support mode, or vice versa?
Yeah, sometimes I have to catch myself.
Well, you are a pretty rare breed of both. I mean, like your clients, I'm assuming are very fortunate to have you, which then, which would bring me to, what's kind of been your experience in the space, and do you have any success stories that you might want to share, or any lessons learned throughout the process?
Oh, yeah, I have a beautiful story to share, and it happened quite recently. So I had a client, and I've had him for about a year, and he was having issues with personal hygiene. It was just really, really difficult for his team to get him to take care of that. And I'm telling you, I couldn't do it as his substance use disorder counselor. His recovery manager, which is different from a recovery coach, couldn't do it. Psychiatrists couldn't do it. Staff couldn't do it. Nobody could do it until he came upon a peer support. Listen, when she came on the scene, all of a sudden, this client made a drastic change in his hygiene. And I'm telling you, I was just, my mouth was hung down. I was just like, what on earth did you do? What did you say? And he had a smile on his face I had never seen. And it was just a totally different person. And the thing about it, Akil, she did it in such a smooth way. It was no big deal the way she did it. You know, just, it was amazing.
I mean, I think it boils back to what you just mentioned, right? The connection. Everyone else tried, maybe didactically, academically, through what research might have shown, but she probably just came down and connected, and all the layers of the onion peeled back, and the saying again that we keep going back to in this Tuesday talk is from Johan Hari: the opposite of addiction is not sobriety; the opposite of addiction is connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. And so, um, that's kind of seems like that's what she was probably able to do in that situation.
Yeah, and another thing too is that a lot of time, before COVID came about, peers, I mean, they didn't think a second thought about putting the client in their car, taking them to the grocery store, taking them to the movies, taking them out. But, now we have to be careful about that. But she did that. She put him in a car and she took him to the barbershop. I mean, he didn't even resist. But I think it may be too because she's like, on the way home, we'll stop by the store, get you some snacks.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we here locally have a number of treatment providers, a number of professional agencies, but then through Project Open, we've been able to start a recovery community organization, Sauk Valley Voices of Recovery. They're building peer education specialists, peer support specialists, hiring recovery coaches, um, and they're looking at the support groups, right? So any advice or any insight or history with the peer-led support groups in this area?
I think that peer led support groups are really, really important because in agencies, what they can do is they can offer their services as far as running groups, facilitating groups. They can be mentors, you know, they can help educate the agencies and their staff on how to communicate with the clients, especially if the client is resistant.
Hmm.
Because many times staff just really kind of not sure on how to approach somebody who's resistant. But
Yeah.
see, a peer, once the peer has built rapport with that person, they know the person and they know what works for them. They know how to talk to them. We have to just remember that we're all human. We can't look at another person as an addict or crazy. We have to change that language. And I'm not saying that agencies use that negative language, but we have to be very, very cognizant of the language that we do use. For instance, addict, just say a person living with addiction
Hmm.
or a person suffering with addiction.
Right. That the added negative connotation is strong.
Yes,
There
yes.
was a very interesting kind of study they did. I think it was a jury or a clinician or a group of clinicians. They presented the exact same case, but in one they put a person with substance use disorder, and in the other one they put a person with addiction. And the feedback to the one on addiction was a lot more punitive and a lot more harsh, like the next steps versus the one that said substance use disorder. So you nailed it. The language is key.
Hmm. And that's where that stigma too comes in. We have to learn how to reduce the stigma. And I think with a peer, the peer can kind of bring that to people's attention, because sometimes we're not intentional about hurting somebody.
Hmm.
It's just what we've learned to say and what we've heard, you know.
Right.
So a peer is really important in kind of turning that thing around because they've been there.
Right. The
They
peer
know how it
probably
feels.
exactly knows how it feels. Right. Treat others the way you want to be treated. A peer was probably had someone like yourself may have had negative interactions in the past, so you're very aware of to not do that and replicate that for somebody
Hmm.
else.
Hmm. Because words hurt.
Yeah.
They say sticks and stones may break my bone, but words will never hurt me. That's not true.
No. I was just thinking about that saying. Jan, the question that I have is so for far too long, and and I'm just going to talk about our area. We've really been treatment focused, professional support and professional therapy and all that focused. And now you have this new age of people coming out, people getting help. I mean, peer support's been around for a long time, but recovery community organizations and these to me are a little bit newer. How can a professional setting, a clinical setting, a behavioral health treatment provider partner effectively with peers to ultimately benefit the patient the best? Like, what would be strategies you'd recommend?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that professionals link up with a peer or link the client up with a peer because a lot of times the peer can offer the professional feedback,
Mm,
you know, and on how to communicate, how to deal with the person. You know, they could just offer that level of communication that maybe they hadn't even thought about,
yeah.
you know. And I think, as I said before, there are different roads to recovery, right? So if peer support is just another way to recover, why not? Everybody has a different path,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And peer support, peers are not there to tell that person what to do, how to do it, when to do it. They're there to help them to figure that out.
Yeah.
But if the person gets stuck and needs to get unstuck, then the peer can offer recommendations, of course. But we're not there to just tell them, oh, here's the rules, here's the requirements, here's the law. We lay down the law.
Right.
No, that's what makes peer support unique.
It's not so much hand holding, but more so that larger mentorship, right?
Yeah.
And something that we're working on here locally is a recovery friendly workplace. And in
Mm-hmm.
that, we are doing training to the employers. And, and we're building that training right now. We have a workforce development group that's working on that training. And part of it is what we've learned is that, hey, someone in recovery, they might have transportation might be a barrier. They might be late to work sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or at work they might, some days might be harder than other days. And how would the manager work with that person? Well, one of the ideas was a recovery coach, that they could
Mm-hmm.
work with the recovery coach. The recovery coach can work with the peer support. They work as a team to ensure that that person is needs are being met, and that we don't jump to any punitive actions right out the gate, because that recovery coach can bridge between the manager who's on the outside, kind of without the lived experience, to the person who's in recovery. That peer support is key in translating and helping both parties find positive solutions.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome point of view because, again, the person who's been through that, they understand the barriers when somebody else might not even really think about it, you know, the barriers that could stop them from getting the help.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to tell a quick story about when I was interviewed for a job right after I went into recovery. I was interviewed for a job at a mental health facility. And in the interview, they asked all these questions about your mental health and your substance abuse. I'm like, what? But see, that's the only interview I have ever been where I said yes to all those questions. Yes, I was an addict. Yes, yes, yes. That got me the job.
Wow. Usually people hide the stigma, right? They hide that. They don't want to bring that out, and fear of being reprimanded. So it's a pretty unique flip side of the coin, right?
Yes, yes. And see, I think that's where peer support comes in. Just acknowledging that. I mean, these agencies need this. They need the services.
And that's kind of the whole idea behind Tuesday Talk, is that to have that conversation, so someone out there can hear this, someone out there can hear different Tuesday Talk, and those who are not as familiar might then at least change the way they think about it, talk
Mhm.
about it, which would then over time hopefully make it a more normalized conversation. Because right now it is very taboo, and
Mhm.
stay away, don't talk about that, don't talk about your addiction, don't talk about your problems. But if we don't talk about it, how do we make it better?
That's right. We have to bring it out. We have to embrace that because if we don't embrace it, we won't heal from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
Jan, I wanted to ask you, kind of what project. You're from the Texas area, right?
Yes, Fort
We're based,
Worth.
yeah, Fort Worth, Texas. And so, kind of what are the projects going on over there? What are you working on down there in this area that other areas might be able to think about and possibly replicate? Or
So I live in a community. It's called Stop Six, STOP, the number six. And where they came from is that my community was the sixth stop that the train took from going from Fort Worth to Dallas. It was a stop six. And it is a cultural district, and we are renovating, revamping, changing our community. And so I'm also a clinician at Urban Village Family Services, which is literally 3 minutes from my house in my car. So it's in my community. And that's one reason, Akil, that I moved back to my community, is to help with the mental illness and the addiction problems that we're having here. And I feel like I moved back for a purpose. So I am the clinician at Urban Village Family Services. So we had the Stop Six projects. We just tore the projects down, and they've been around a long, long time. And we tore them down to the ground, and the families were given vouchers to move to different areas. And I think 30 of the families were committed to come to Urban Village Family Services, where they can get help finding jobs, they can get help, with training, and also as a clinician, we can offer help with mental illness and substance abuse. So that's one of the things that's going on in my community. Another thing is that I'm a member of the Historic Stop Six Neighborhood Association. I'm actually the treasurer, and I love it because, as a leader in the community, we have a say so. We get to say, what are you going to build here? What you're building, is it going to help the community? Is it going to provide jobs in the community? So it's stuff like that that really, really, that I enjoy doing, because it's helping my community. So when I was first moved here, I was built a house here, and I was here every day, Akil, with the builders. I think I got on their nerves. But one day I was backing out of my driveway on my street, and I'm telling you, this street where I live on now, there was needles up and down the street, people having sex in cars. It was like that. So anyway, I was backing out my driveway, and I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was a man walking down the street, and he was having a whole conversation with himself.
Sure.
And so when I saw that, it occurred to me, this is why you're here.
Yeah.
To offer this man help and resources. He may not know where to go, what to do. And I could say to him too, I'm a peer. Been there, done that. I don't know about walking down the street like that, but I have talked to myself.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the part of the community that I love. I love helping my people.
We need more people like you, Jan. I know there's a lot out there. We've had a lot on the Tuesday Talk, and just with the work that you do and kind of the perspective you lend is very unique. And so, the title of the talk, Recovery is Possible Through Peer Support. It's very important then that people who want to enter recovery try to find an agency, an RCO, or someone who can help them find those resources, get connected, and just be that shoulder to cry on, that ear to listen to, and just that support to get through. Because, talk about a little bit about your journey in recovery. I'm assuming that early stages were probably some of the hardest, right? And did it get easier over time, or is it still hard, or is it easy now? I mean,
I tell my clients all the time, I cannot even count the times with my hands and feet of the times I tried to stop using. I tried to get clean and sober, but it got to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. It got to the point where I was just like, you know what, this is my bottom. I don't want my bottom to be the grave. So when I realized that I was at my bottom, that's when, I woke and made some changes in my life and vowed that I would never go back. I hear people say never. Oh, I will say never. I will say never. I'm saying it right now, never.
Good. Nice. I love it.
Because that's how I stay clean and sober, with language like that.
It starts in the mind first. If you think it, you can achieve it.
That's right. Awesome. So I know I want to offer hope to those who feel hopeless and helpless.
Yeah.
And I tell them, you know what? I don't look like what I've been through. But I have some stories.
Yeah.
But thank God that I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm grateful for being sober, clean and sober for almost 14 years.
They gosh, I had something in my hand. I just lost it.
It's
So
because I'm talking so much.
no, you just said something that was never say, man. It made me think of something that I wanted to share, but must maybe it'll come back. Jan, I wanted to get any closing thoughts or any ideas you have on peer support or any of the things we talked about today. Any words of wisdom, and, closing remarks, I suppose.
Yes, yes. I just can't emphasize how important peer support is because there are people out there who will not go to therapy. There are people out there who will not go to counseling. But if they have peer support, that may be the ticket,
Yeah,
you know. So why not try it?
yeah, I love it. Um, you know, one of the big things we do over here at Project Open, a lot of our projects are focused on giving people who don't have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And we've sat with chief medical officers, chief nursing officers, pharmacists, doctors, anesthesiologists, licensed clinical social workers. And we've sat around a table brainstorming solutions. And it's been the person with lived experience in the room who says, I, I love what you did. I love what you said. But let me just share this bit with you. And it's like, I mean, they just totally changed the game. That voice is huge. So, I guess I know you would. I think you'd stand by the statement. If you are with lived experience, if you're in recovery, please speak up. Please join those local community coalitions. Your perspective
Mm-hmm.
is unparalleled. We have literally designed an entire project and have someone with lived experience say that's not going to work. This is how it should work, and we
Mm-hmm.
change the whole plan just because what they say makes perfect sense. But we just, sometimes we just don't think that way.
Yeah.
Academics and researchers who are trying to build programs. So
And I love that name, peer advocate, too, because as a peer advocate, which is the same as peer support,
mhm.
you teach the client to advocate for themselves,
Right.
to speak up for themselves, because like you say, a lot of them, they don't feel like they're being listened to anyway. So why say anything? Why go to treatment? They're not going to listen to me. So that advocacy is a key piece of the recovery. You got to start loving yourself,
Mm-hmm.
And have compassion for yourself where you're able to speak up and say, this is what I need. This is what I want. That assertive communication.
I can't think of a better way to end the Tuesday talk right over there, right? Jan, again, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Um, your perspective and your experience is very unique, but also very common. And we appreciate you joining us today. And again, Project Open is focusing on those three domains: prevention, treatment, and recovery. Recovery today, September's Recovery Month, so we hope to continue the recovery trend. Next week, we should have another recovery event, recovery-related topic, and this weekend, upcoming weekend, is RecoverCon. So for those listening, check it out. RecoverCon is coming up. Jan was trying to join us for that, but had some prior engagement, so we got her on the Tuesday talk instead. But maybe next year, Jan, we might see you at RecoverCon 2022.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Akil, for being such a gracious host.
No, thank you for your being gracious with your time and your story. And everyone, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.